I expect us to do well.
Prime Minister, you have to come and do something better.
Welcome to JNN's discussion program on the Frontline. I'm Shane Masters. Now, today we're unpacking the promises as we take a deep dive into Vote 2025. Joining the program are political commentator and executive director of Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE, Germaine Barrett, public relations specialist at JADE, Dejanae Fagan, and along with Matthew White, he'll join the program a little later. He is the wellness support specialist at JADE. We'll also have Vice President of Generation 2000 G2K Newton Harris and PNP Youth Advisor Mario Wallace. And with us to assist the deaf community is sign language advocate Antoinette Aiken. Thank you, Antoinette, for your services. Firstly, we'll begin with Germaine and Ms. Fagan. Mr. Barrett, looking at the JLP and PNP's manifesto for 2025, were you satisfied with the plans they have for the next 5 years if they form government?
I am satisfied with the plans, in as much as the plans are wide-ranging, that they really give some solutions to every single Jamaican at whatever stage of life you find yourself. Whether you're a farmer, you're unemployed, you're a youth, you're a senior citizen, you hear plans between the two manifestos that would touch and impact people's lives positively. The question, though, in my mind, and I think it's in the minds of most Jamaicans, is one, the feasibility and the extent to which we can be convinced that these plans, though brilliantly articulated, are sensible in terms of budget, whether or not we're going to be essentially upending the fiscal stability that we've achieved over these years. And I think that's a lot of what the conversation has been about. When I think, for example, about the income, the threshold, the income, yes, regarding, yes, and so forth. Those are some of the issues that I think are perplexing many Jamaicans at this time still.
Okay. Ms. Fagan?
So I agree with Mr. Barrett. I see and I hear of, very interesting and elaborate policies, but I'm not too sure about how exactly these policies will be implemented. And hearing about things from the past wherein promises were made and they weren't kept, I am a bit skeptical as it relates to how feasible, some of these policies are and whether they will really be executed.
And it goes back to the economy debate, debate 2, where the opposition spokesperson on finance, Julian Robinson, was talking about his 3.5 million threshold increase compared to that of the JLP's 25 to 15. Which one do you see as more feasible in the economy that we are now in? We go to Mr. Barrett.
I think the question of feasibility, there are concerns, major concerns regarding both manifesto promises. I think the question, though, is resolved when you come to appreciating the credibility of both parties and the capacity of both parties, demonstrable by the history of both parties and the work that they've done so far. Whether or not you can, as a Jamaican citizen, unclear about the mechanisms and the feasibility of these, which of the two gives you greater confidence? And I think both parties have been waging quite a vociferous war. The JLP has said, listen, they have been a party of fiscal discipline. They're not going to wreck the economy. All the adjustments are going to be based on the country's capacity to afford it. And the PNP's response is, well, simply we have established the fiscal framework and the fiscal rules. We're not going to abandon them. But at the same time, independent authorities, the economists have been saying the calculation being presented by either party are significantly lower than what they will amount in real terms. You're talking about 70 and over in terms of billions of dollars. And so the question then in my mind is, to what extent can we be convinced that these, these suggestions, these commitments have been properly calculated, calibrated, and what then are also the timelines within which they will be meted out? So I think those doubts mean that many Jamaicans are at this time uncertain as to whether or not it's worth them committing. Unlike in 2016 when we had the 1.5 million dollar threshold floated by the GLP, then you would have had some pushback and some sort of a claim from the PNP that it can't work. We've seen it work. We know the success of it. I think that goes to the credit of the GLP this time around now. But again, I think it's even Stevens with respect to whether or not one party is gaining the edge over the other.
Now, Ms. Fagan, as it pertains to the youth, do you think that this has resonated with the young people? The 3.5 and the 25 to 15%?
Yes, I actually do. But what I've heard, at least my colleagues saying, is that the one that will be in a phased manner, so gradually building up, seems like a better solution than the jump to the 3.5, because one favors sustainable development, whilst the other is more short term in a sense. So concerns are being raised as to whether this change and this growth can be sustained.
Germaine, your thoughts on that point, though. If we move to the 3.5 and if we move to the 15%, based on what is happening in the economy, we have seen the economy growing by 1.5% over the last couple of years. Do you think that a 3.5 and a 25 to 15% is feasible and is workable over a long term?
Well, possibly if phased, and the phasing of it has to be measured based on the capacity of the state to afford it without taking on additional debt, without imposing additional tax and so forth, because neither of those two approaches are desirable by Jamaicans at large. So only then will it be had. I know the PNP has not been explicitly clear with respect to the timelines, but I think reasonably one cannot expect that we will increase the threshold to 3.5 without in one fell sweep. It has to be phased. It necessarily has to be phased. So otherwise, the economy will come crashing. Yes. So I think both approaches are phased, are going to be calculated and calibrated based on the fiscal space. One of the concerns I have, though, is the PNP consistently saying, well, they are going to fund this through, one, expanding the economy and growing it. I don't know what growth-inducing measures that they have in mind to get the economy to grow to a sufficient extent to afford this. That's one concern. So I'm not sure I'm convinced just yet about that. And the second thing is they say that they're going to go into the budget and look at areas that the government is spending funds on particular programs that they may not agree with and cut these programs. I don't know what those programs are. And so the JLP now has been saying, well, you're going to cut path and you're going to cut this and that and so forth. All programs that Jamaicans by and large believe are necessary programs. The PNP has not posited a response as to some kinds of programs that they are minded to cut. And it can't be that they say, well, we've been in opposition, so we don't know. They must know because, hey, we know what the government's programs are. We know what the budget is. Jamaica operates with a degree of transparency and openness such that once you're in government, especially if you're in government, or once you're in the Parliament of Jamaica, you ought to have some indication such that you can say to Jamaica, at least this program is under consideration for being cut.
Ms. Fagan, when you talk about cutting programs such as PATH, which the government has not said anything regarding which programs they'd cut, but if you cut a program such as PATH, what's the implication you believe for thousands of children and adults as well?
I think the effects would be devastating. As a young woman from rural Jamaica, I have seen that even with the presence of PATH, living conditions have not necessarily significantly improved for many households. So if that is removed, then that would basically I don't even know what I would say would happen because I think it just cannot be removed. It is far too important.
If I may, O'Shane, jump
Yes.
in here. Path will not be cut. Path was established by the People's National Party. The People's National Party still has a deeper commitment to
Yes.
socialism and so forth, more than does even the JLP, more than the JLP, although they are almost aligned right now. And
Yes.
so that's not a truth. So when I hear people from the Jamaica Labour Party side saying, sort of fear mongering that path is at risk, that is not the case. That's not the case. Um, but again, they are allowed to say this because the absence of any information presents an opportunity. Nature abhors a void. If it is that you are not providing information, then you are allowing your opposition to conjure up all sorts of information,
True.
disinformation, misinformation that you're going to have to respond to and find yourself caught up in an unnecessary war of words.
Now, we continue the discussion because one of the things that we need to look at is voter apathy, the young people. Germaine, are we seeing more young people interested in voting? When you look at 2020, we saw the national score for the elections was about 30% of people going out to vote. And majority of that was that young people weren't going out. Are we seeing a change based on the policies that are being put forward for the next 5 years?
I think there are two things that need to be done for us to improve and sort of reduce substantially the levels of voter apathy and voter disinterest, particularly amongst the youth. One, young people have aspirations and dreams and ambitions that are far ahead of that which our political leaders are providing to us. Yes? And so that leaves a sense of there's a major gap, a deficit. And that deficit is reflected in people's minds, in young people's minds, as being that which would exist under a JLP or a PNP administration. So there's no point. And secondly, young people are also caught up in a realm that is hard to get to, at which it is hard to get at them. Social media. Prime Minister needs to explain something in the economic realm or some sort of complex issue relating to crime or so. It's going to take time. It's going to be difficult to get people to understand. But young people aren't consuming long form content. Yes, young people
Yes.
consume bite-sized bits of information, which you can't get the thorough understanding of it as you would back in the day. For example, in Michael Manley, when you literally have vehicles coming out with loudspeakers parked in the community square and play audio and
True.
communicate and I'm talking about the era of API. Yes. Um, those times are gone already, and so it's incredibly difficult for political leaders to engage the citizenry in a way that gets the citizenry to be sufficiently informed so as to contribute to the democratic dialogue.
So, Fagan, when we look at the PNP's manifesto and the JP's manifesto, we see where housing is also a nice thing that is there for the young people. We also see where the PNP is saying youth and innovation, $1 billion for youth innovation fund annually. Aren't those things that will draw young people towards either party?
On the surface, it would. But one of the main questions I hear young people asking in today's society is one simple 3-letter word: how? How are you going to finance this? You have proposed this, it looks lovely, it's intriguing, but based on history, wherein we have seen promises being made that were not kept. How are you going to fund this? And if it is that you can prove to us how you are going to do that, then whichever side convinces us more, then we'll work with that side. That's what I'm seeing happening now.
Germaine?
Yes, I think we can't expect to solve voter apathy in the short term. Nothing short of consistent delivery of the grand promises, such as the ones we have documented in the manifestos, nothing short of that will lead young people back into the political realm to engage. And so we have to be patient, we have to be deliberate, we have to be consistent. Politicians have to prove themselves to be deserving of the youth vote, right? So
Yes.
I think we should shift from the kind of agonizing, which is what is existing, in spaces like these where people talk about voter apathy ever so often, and shift the focus and say, well, it exists. How do we fix it? Let us fix it by being governments, being opposition, being parliamentarians
Yes.
who deliver consistently. Yes.
But how do we hold these politicians accountable to these manifesto promises, though?
Well, people like us, people who operate in civil society, um, the more mature people who recognize their role in the democracy, that while everybody in the society believes that governments ought to be held accountable, they see themselves as citizens as having a responsibility to engage in the democratic dialogue and the discussion. Yes, we have to do it at first. We have to set the standard, and then eventually you have the younger persons falling in line. But the voter apathy is concerningly high in the Middle Ages, even senior citizens. Quite frankly, quite frankly, apathetic. When you have the average voter turnout being, in a good year, 40-something%, that is bad. That is bad.
So what we are seeing, though, Ms. Fagan, is the die-heartedness of people towards a political party that is being shunned, right?
Yes, that is being shunned. When I converse with my colleagues, they are very much offended by, persons just seeing colors. And they're saying that it is time for us to really examine the policies that are being presented and listen out for how these policies will be implemented, what will be the implications and the effects of these policies, so as to ensure that we create a brighter future for ourselves and for those who come after us. So they're not seeing colors. They want to see substance. They want reason, they want logics, and they want politicians to make sense.
Now, were there any issues, though, for both of you that you saw in the manifestos for 2025, and what were those issues, and what do you think could be done to address those? We'll start with Germaine.
Yeah, the first issue that comes to my mind is the issue of crime. I'm actually surprised that throughout these three debates, very little has been said about crime. And certainly in the People's National Party's manifesto, hardly anything has been said about crime. Crime remains an impediment to development. Crime remains a hindrance to the enjoyment of citizens of life in this country. It remains significant. And don't be fooled by the drastic reduction in crime. We need to hear the GLP and the PNP convey plans into the future such that crime, which may very well rebound, once it is that they come, the criminals get accustomed and are relieved from the shock and awe of the new J-Safe arrangement. They find innovative ways, and before you know it, crime surges again. So what then is the plan? We didn't hear that at all from the PNP, and very little said from the GLP. So that was disappointing. I'm actually also surprised that with the numbers as they are right now, not much dialogue, discussion has been had over it and what has led to it. I mean, we heard a little bit of it about it coming out in the debate last night when we spoke about states of emergencies. Mark Golding saying, well, we on the PNP, we are successful in that we have managed to wrestle the government into a position where it can't use it willy-nilly because of the ruling from the courts. We hear the Prime Minister declaring that it is a major facet of the arrangements and the tools that have led to the reduction of crime. Yes? Again, deeper dialogue needs to be had on that as well.
All right, thank you, Germaine. Ms. Fagan, just hold your point. We'll take a quick break right here on the front line. Manifestos are powerful tools, but only if citizens understand them and hold leaders accountable. Now, we will continue our discussion on voter apathy and why are young people not really voting. Let's see what's up next.
Coming up next, we join sign language advocate Antoinette Aiken on the issue of voter apathy, especially among the disabled community.
Welcome back to On the Front Line. I'm Shane Masters. Before we continue our discussion, let's hear from our social media host, Alia Bryant.
Thank you, Shane. Now, the debates have been trending the last few days, and social media had a lot to say. We start with a comment from Instagram. All this threshold talk, informal workers do not benefit from threshold. At least 40% of Jamaicans will not benefit. Next, we have September 3. People are going to choose results over rehearsed promises. And a comment from Twitter. We have the emergency rooms are overcrowded, no beds. People are in wheelchairs and stretchers sleeping, not to mention the lack of alertness due to the understaffed nurses. That's so sad, and that's the change I want to see. Now, there's a lot to unpack as we go along, Shane, and we have more to come. It's back to you in studio.
Thanks, Alia. Now, we're continuing our discussion on the recent political debates. From jobs to healthcare to education, both parties made big promises. But what do they really mean for everyday Jamaicans? Joining us now, we continue our discussion with Germaine Barrett. He is the founder and executive director of the Jamaican Association for Debate and Empowerment. And we'll also have Antoinette Aiken, who is right here continuing to do our sign language for our deaf community. Now, when we talk about voter apathy, we also have a very important set of people in our country that are somewhat left out. We're talking about our disabled community, the deaf community, those who are visually impaired. Now, Antoinette, you're an advocate for the deaf community. Tell me, what has been the major thing for the deaf community as it pertains to debate and to this September 3 election?
Well, as you know, the first debate for them was a disaster. The second was a disaster. The third, to be honest, I haven't watched it, so I'm not sure the feedback, but I got messages from deaf people writing complaints that they're planning to send to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities about the debates, all three of them, and how they never felt included. They felt excluded. And because of that, I have videos that deaf people send me saying, them not gonna bother vote. I'm saying that it don't make no sense, because nobody don't care, them not gonna bother vote. But I also remind them that both political parties have paid for interpreting services for their mass rallies last week and this week. So I told them to just pay attention to the mass rallies as much as, maybe they would have had questions that they would have wanted to pose through social media. They didn't have the opportunity to do that. So a lot of them are not interested in voting, while you still have some who are going to vote, and they're going to vote for their own personal reasons.
Germaine? Germaine, can you hear me? All right, not getting through to Germaine. So we continue with Ms. Aiken. Ms. Aiken, now, when you look at voter apathy among the disabled community, how widespread is that?
Well, I can't really speak for the whole community,
But the deaf community.
Community, yeah, yes. What I know, the little that I know. Well, for the deaf community, it's widespread. I think there was an announcement that we have around 150,000 deaf people in Jamaica. If only 40% of Jamaica and a good electoral day shows up, that's probably like 1 million thereabout, 1 million mash, and you're losing 150,000 deaf people You just excluded a whole group. I'm sure some MPs don't even get 5,000 votes or 8,000 votes. You have lost people that you could have communicated with, shared information with, allow them to feel included. And, and to be honest, deaf people are complaining because they say, the Disabilities Act is there, but they don't recognize our language. Jamaican Sign Language is not an official language. We aren't recognized. And that's why what happened last week into this week could happen because there's no protection. There's absolutely no protection for the deaf community. Reasonable accommodation can mean anything. You get me?
Yes.
So Jamaican Sign Language becoming an official language is something each party, whoever decides, should be discussing. That should be a part of their manifestos so that deaf people can feel included and say, well, at least now I am getting my language officially recognized. That's something that needs to change. And without that change, you're going to have less and less deaf people interested in politics.
Now, Germaine, what are your thoughts about the deaf community, the disabled community, not really getting a fair share in these debates?
Well, it is appalling and it is disgraceful how the deaf community and the hard of hearing persons would have been treated in these debates. The fact is that these are events of a national importance, and for them in the first instance to have been excluded is shameful. I cannot think of words stronger than those to express my disappointment. I am, though, pleased with the articulation of some ideas. I think we're making progress with respect to how it is that we're accommodating persons within the disabled community. And I'm a member of that community, as you may know.
Yes.
The conversation in the third debate about configuring, infrastructure such that it is far more accommodating to persons who are, challenged in terms of sight or may have mobility challenges and so forth. It's an important part. I know the government, for example, have through NHT decided that they're going to give special loans to NHT homeowners to retrofit their homes so that they can become far more accommodative to the needs of the disabled community. So those are just some of the examples. On the PNP side, you hear the $1 billion fund that is to be established, and so forth. So there is clearly an increased, a heightened attention to the community. I just want for the community to recognize that, quite frankly, we are our greatest advocates, And if we don't speak for ourselves,
True.
Other interests and other issues will displace our concerns. So let's keep the advocacy up, and let's continue to press and demand representation of the interests of disabled people within the broader national discourse.
Now, a question was posed to both parties about reserving jobs in the public sector for persons with disabilities. Let's hear what they had to say.
Mr. Golding, we hear the broad statements of policy and principle, but what persons with disabilities want are jobs, which is why I'm asking specifically if your administration would implement a recommendation to reserve a certain percentage of public sector jobs for persons with disabilities.
Yes, we have committed to that. Across MD&As, ministries, departments and agencies, that we would like to see quotas or an allocation for the disability community to have the benefit of employment opportunities in the public sector.
We do make it a point of duty to ensure that persons with disabilities are employed at the office of the Prime Minister, and we will give that directive, if it is not already in effect, to all the ministries. But more than that, people with disabilities want to be independent and they want to work independently, many of them. And we, through various initiatives, including through the various development funds that we have, will provide resources to persons with disability so that they can start their own businesses.
Now, you've heard the statements by both the opposition leader and the Prime Minister as it pertains to saving some public sector jobs for members of the disabled community. So, Germaine, your thoughts on those statements?
I think those statements are actually appropriate. This is an issue on which both political parties converge. They agitate and advocate for, and certainly in the sentiments expressed in the third debate, that there is a need for greater inclusiveness of disabled members, disabled members of the Jamaican community within areas of employment and so forth. And I also like the fact that they recognize that there's a there's profound ingenuity that exists in the community that needs to be enabled through funding support and other modes of enablement. And I certainly applaud both the parties for those sentiments. I just want for those sentiments to transition from words to action. I want in the next term, whichever party gains state power, to make it a reality, and so that 5 years down the road, we can reflect as members of the community and say, yes, things have improved by leaps and bounds.
Antoinette?
I agree with what Germaine said. I think that we need to set things in motion, and anything that we're doing, or any government, whoever forms the government, whatever decisions are made for persons with disabilities, I think they should include them, and not just include the few that they know, but they should always try to find a way to get stakeholders from all over the island who are disabled or deaf to express their grosses, what they need to function and survive and be accommodating. Once that happens, I think, improvement will be there. But you can't make decisions without the people who you're making decisions for involved. And I think that's important.
So we have the JCPD and we have other organizations that deal with persons with disabilities. Do you think that somewhat they are being left out of the discussions that are taking place on a governmental level? Germaine?
I know that we've had the Disabilities Act that has affected the structure and function of the JCPD. And I know that they're going through an evolution of their own. I know that, for example, the tribunal that is established where persons who are disabled can go and file complaints about grievances that they may have come across in the society. That is still a work in progress. I'm concerned, one, that the progress in these respects is taking an inordinately long time. And I'm quite frankly running out of patience, as are many of my community members. And secondly, I find that some of the structural changes that need to be made, starting, for example, with the public service, government offices, are not being done at a rapid enough pace. Listen, we keep boasting now with the fiscal space and, we're reducing debt to GDP ratio. Well, a lot of those macroeconomic successes need also now to translate to effecting the kinds of tangible changes so that the lives of deaf persons, blind persons, other persons with other disabilities can be made better off. Listen, I became blind 2 years ago. And I used to walk on sidewalks and I used to find it uncomfortable and difficult. But I used to, get by. Now that I am blind and I have to walk with a cane, it is not just difficult, it is impossible in many circumstances. Blind people are excluded from many spaces, and I'm sure deaf persons would have most recently felt profound neglect and abandonment by virtue of their exclusion from these debates. So we have to be absolutely, fixed in our position and unrelenting in the view that deaf, blind persons with other disabilities are a part of the Jamaican community and deserve and have a right to be included as much as the society can accommodate.
All right, thank
Nothing
you.
less.
Thank you very much, Germaine. And want to thank you, Germaine Barrett. He's the Executive Director for the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE, and also Antoinette Aiken. She is sign language advocate. We want to thank you so much for joining us here on the front line. Now, it's clear that without the people's voice, democracy weakens. Parties may present Now, parties may present solutions, but the real challenge is convincing Jamaicans that their vote matters.
Coming up next, we continue our discussion on the political debate with Vice President of Generation 2000 G2K, Newton Harris, and PNP Youth Advisor Mario Wallace.
Welcome back to On the Front Line. Before we head into our next discussion, let's hear from our social media host, Alia Bryant. Alia?
Yes, O'Shane. Now, a lot is happening in the social space. Let's head over to YouTube to see what our viewers are saying. Now, one said, teachers leaving, classrooms packed, youth stuck, hashtag fix education. Another said, they say unemployment is low, but most jobs available don't pay enough to live on. And finally, we have another one saying, it's so hard to own a house in Jamaica. Only a certain class of people can. It's back to you, O'Shane.
Thanks, Alia. Now we're continuing our discussion on the recent political debates. From jobs to healthcare to education, both parties made big promises. But what do they really mean for everyday Jamaicans? Joining us now, we have Vice President of Generation 2000 G2K, Newton Harris, and National Organizer for the PNP YO, Mario Wallace. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, first, before we get into the debates, tell me about your manifestos. Are you both satisfied with what your parties have put forward for the Jamaican people for the next 5 years? We start with Mario.
Yes, I'm very much satisfied with what my party has put forward in our manifesto as it relates to plans to addressing housing, especially for youth, plans for the disability community, and and also how we have also delivered our package, the manifesto. So we have it in audiobook, we have it in battles, we have it in English, and we have a compact version, which is a more summarized version of it. So yes, I am pleased with it, and I welcome the 3.5 also, but that puts more in our pocket and so forth. So yes, I'm very much pleased with the manifesto so far.
Mr. Harris?
I am very confident that our manifesto, the JLP's manifesto, gives everybody a reason to choose Jamaica. The manifesto came about as a result of very extensive consultations with various stakeholder groups, various persons from the breadth and length of Jamaica, young people, older people, young professionals, people in all different sectors. So this is really a joining together of hearts and minds, and then putting these ideas based on what the JLP government has achieved in the previous terms, building on those achievements of the past 9 years and going even further for the Jamaican people.
You mentioned housing. Both of you mentioned housing. In the manifestos, the PNP says that it will build 50,000 affordable homes on public lands, excluding land cost. Introduce NHG rent to own for informal workers. 1 billion young owners deposit fund for under 45s. Mortgage grace periods and preferential debt ratios for public sector workers. Now, that is under the PNP. Now, under the JLP, it proposes 60,000 housing solutions through construction and development across Jamaica, expanding social housing with 10,000 units by 2030 and transform informal settlements through land regularization and infrastructure upgrades. New interest rate reductions for public sector workers, additional 1% after 5 years and 2% after 10 years. Now, when you look at both these housing proposals, people might be saying that this is massive, especially on the JLP side where they had promised to build some 60 houses, and those are still not completed to date. Mr. Harris, how do you get Jamaicans, the young people, to trust the JLP administration going forward with such a bold statement?
The the thing is that the JLP is the party that has actually performed and given you something to believe in. Early in your conversation with Germaine and the others, I heard the question of apathy. And I think that young people have become apathetic. This issue of political apathy in Jamaica has grown so much because we've had governments that have not delivered, whether it is that they've mismanaged the economy and did not have the fiscal space as a result of that mismanagement in order to deliver the things that people need. I think that is a huge issue that we've had to deal with. But in the last 9 years, I think especially toward the end of the term, even considering that 2 to 3 years were stolen by COVID, even considering that, I think young people and all Jamaicans have seen the kind of things, the kind of results that the JLP government has delivered for them. I think the 34,000 homes that we built stand as a testament to that, and particularly for young people. The Prime Minister had instituted by order that 10% of all NHT developments were to be set aside for young people, designated for young people. We've done a lot in terms of the interest rates to bring those down. And so really lowered interest rates, raised the benefit limits. So we've really targeted young people in terms of housing. And that's just one aspect of how we've helped young people.
But Mr. Harris, even though...
You want to talk about plans for the future?
Yeah, but even though you're building these houses and 10% for working professionals, young working professionals, the cost of these houses are another thing, right?
That is true. That is true. And the cost of housing is something that worldwide has been spiraling, sometimes out of control. The issue here in Jamaica is that we need to manufacture more of the housing components here in Jamaica. I really do think that that would help our situation. There are companies that make very small building materials. And I'm not talking about the construction sector. I'm talking about things like windows and the finishes. So not the mining sector, sorry. So if we were able to manufacture more of those components, housing components here in Jamaica, it would bring down the cost. And I'm sure when we suggest that to the government, that they would already have been thinking of these issues. So the Prime Minister has in fact started talking about those components and delivering cost-effective housing, redesigning NHT houses to ensure that they are more cost-effective. We can't just keep building the same brick and mortar. They do need to be resilient. We can't live anywhere, we have to consider where we live rather. We live in the second most disaster-prone region in the world. So the houses have to be tough, but we also have to find a way to bring down the cost of these units. And that is something that the government has been working.
Mr. Wallace, your response as it pertains to the housing plan for the PNP government, if they form government after the September 3 elections?
Well, I do believe we have put forward a solid plan as it relates to housing with the rent to own. This gives a young person the opportunity to convert your rent into purchasing a house. Let us use the root rent development by NHT. We have a lot of young persons in that same development that are paying rent. They are able to pay the rent, but they weren't able to secure the mortgage, or wasn't even able to secure the closing costs to purchase one of those units. So with the PNP's plan, we're giving persons a $500,000 grant towards the deposit for their house, and as I said, we're doing the rent to own. So your rent can be converted as long as you show the ability to pay your rent over a period of time. That will be converted into your deposit, and essentially you become a homeowner through mortgage. Mr. Harris made mention earlier about the voter apathy. My view on it is a bit different. And different as it relates, so there are some aspects that we need to look at from a legislative side. We're talking about the whole logistics. So going to vote, So I'm from Northwest St. Elizabeth, for argument's sake. My vote is in a community called Carisbrooks. I work in New Kingston. I'm given the time, except midday, to go to St. Elizabeth. That's like, okay, 2.5 hour, 1.5 hour drive down, you know. What time, and that doesn't include any unforeseen situations along the way. Like
and then you have to take into consideration also the amount of time you'll be in a line.
That is it. And that's that too. So you may even reach St. Elizabeth to vote and polls closed on you. And we're at the mountain now. You're earning, say you earn a 65,000 a month. The toll, gas for the vehicle, it's going to cost you more than 15,000. So it is not that the youths don't want to participate, but the cost to do so, the barrier for us to do so. So it's something that we have to look at now as expanding, whether it's online voting, whatever it may be. But we have to look at something like that. And then we talk about the disillusion of, you know, the promises. They're making promises and we're not fulfilling them.
Yes.
A promise was made that we have had fixed election dates. That has not been done. Where the promise was made as it relates to the fixed election dates.
Yes.
And other promises. So the theatrics in the thing, because I remember the JLP stated that the JPS incentive that was in the PNP's 2020 manifesto was not doable, but we saw where they were able to do it, you know, and we saw other aspects of the manifesto being implemented, the PNP's plan being implemented at the time that the JLP stated that was not doable. So, you know, there are some little things that causes us to not want to vote as young persons, and one of those barriers is really the logistics behind it, and even putting your work above your civic duty, because I'm going to secure. Imagine I work on a production line. Boss not going to let you alone. You have bosses like that. So even though, so that is something that we have to take as it relates to legislation to ensure that I can go and to exercise my franchise vote and not be penalized or being told that I have to take a sick day or something along that line to express myself.
So you're basically saying that we need legislation.
Yes, to really help address, because we have to really look at the root cause, and I would want to believe those food ticket items are root cause for persons to not for the low voter turnout. When we talk about the last election, 37%, it being the lowest.
Yes.
It must also, but it was in COVID. A lot of persons stayed home because of that concern of one's safety, one's health. So, you know, there are things like that for us to consider. But yes, the plan as it relates to housing, it is solid, it is doable, and when we form government, we'll be executing.
All right, I want to go to a point that came out in the. I want to go before I take you, Newton. I want to go to a point from last night's debate that was on Thursday night regarding the citizenship argument. Mark had this to say. Let's hear that clip first, and then we'll take your response, Newton.
Wanted to just make it absolutely clear that I am indeed born here as a Jamaican. Here is my birth certificate, and it shows I was born at the University Hospital on July 19th, 1965, and it's right here. I hope your camera can pick it up. And I have a copy for you, Prime Minister, right here. And I wish you could provide me with a copy of your certification, but of course you can't do so.
Newton, I'll give you a chance to respond to what Mario had said earlier, and then I'll ask my question. Go ahead.
Thank you. He said quite a lot, Mario. Said quite a lot. But I'm going to try to just stick to the housing, just two things, the housing and the logistics of voting. So I had spoken about the cost of each unit But twinned with that issue has to be the number of solutions, the number of houses on the market. More houses will keep costs down, supply and demand. So we have said that the 60,000 that will be coming on stream will help with that issue. We've already broken ground on several developments, Raintree, Bernard Lodge. These things are actually happening. Integrated community developments for persons to have the services they need, and of course for the homes to be built. These things are already being done by the GLP. In terms of the logistics for voting, I just wanted to point out to persons that the law already says that they are entitled to a certain number of hours, 3, I believe.
Yeah, 3 hours.
Lunchtime, so that's 4 hours if you take your lunchtime. And so you are to enforce your rights as far as practicable. Sure, if you are an emergency worker and you have an emergency, you are on duty or on call, or you are called from your duty to respond to a situation, then flexibility has to be made for that. And on that note, I would condemn any attempts by anyone, whether an individual or political party, to try and thwart the voting of emergency workers, first responders, including police and firemen, on a day when they are designated to vote. It seemed quite coordinated, and we condemn, G2K condemns that activity, that coordinated attempt to thwart the democratic process.
All right, my next question, I'll do 2 in 1. We saw where the opposition leader pulled out his birth certificate, the old one. Do you think that was just plain, let me use one of the words that they have been using, gerrymandering, in terms of pulling out that birth certificate? And do you believe that the debates were too focused on corruption, especially the Prime Minister's statutory declaration? I'll go with you first, Mario.
Well, honestly, I see no issue with my party leader presenting his birth certificate, especially the old one, because if he had presented the new version, you might hear another story behind it to say, it either fabricated or something along that line. So I find it to be, yes, it might have not put everything to rest, but at least in the minds of persons, you can see he's a born Jamaican. And I think it threw the Prime Minister off Tito, because when the Prime Minister is going to say, being born in Jamaica doesn't make you a Jamaican, it questions, and I would want to say, should the 2 million voters should really ask the question, am I a Jamaican, or what makes me Jamaican, if not by birth? So, I would love to hear the real response to that one, because it just was not for that moment. So I guess it worked, what the party leader did, to kind of pull the Prime Minister to make such utterance. But again, we really labored a lot on the corruption, which my comrade leader has pointed to the Impeachment Act as something that we will put forward to ensure the protection. So, I don't have any issue with the birth paper being sure. Yeah.
Mr. Harris?
Thanks, Shane, for this question. I think a lot of Jamaicans are contemplating this very matter. A lot of Jamaicans have been contemplating this very matter for quite some time. And it's very disturbing that we have someone who is seeking to become Prime Minister of this country, and we do not know in which country that person pledges allegiance. Because the issue is not the land of his birth. It is not where he's born. The issue is his demonstration that he is he is not loyal to Jamaica. The issue is, the facts are that Mark Golding received his first Jamaican passport at age 40 plus. At age 40 plus, when he was going to become a minister of government. Now, do I go back to the beginning or do I continue here? All right. So at 40 plus, when he was becoming a minister of government. Now, when you become a minister or an MP and you want an official passport, I don't know whether you're aware that PICA, the entity that issues passports in Jamaica,
Yes.
passport, immigration, citizenship, they request your regular passport before they issue you an official or diplomatic passport. And then you travel with both. So the issue is, to get something that allowed him to perform ministerial duties in Jamaica overseas, he would have needed an original passport. And many people suspect that is why he eventually got a Jamaican passport. But for years before that, he was operating a business, operating all kinds of, who knows what he was doing, but clearly operating, traveling back and forth, personal for business, without a Jamaican passport. What document was he traveling on? What was he conducting that business on? Does that say that he's loyal to Jamaica? Is that demonstrative of someone who is loyal to Jamaica, who chooses Jamaica? The answer is no. So when we talk about the fact that he has now shown an older piece of paper, and I disagree with Mario, the older piece of paper is easier, in fact, to forge than the newer with the additional security features. That's why we improve upon systems to add security features. So don't say it is just totally not great for you to say or suggest that the newer one is more forgeable. He brings an old document that regular Jamaicans would not be able to bring into PICA and say, issue me a passport on this thing. So it raises more questions than it provides answers. And Jamaicans deserve the answers. And I want to speak to the issue of allegiance once again.
Yes.
A couple years ago, and Mark Golding will be fully aware, and the rest of the PNP will be fully aware, that when they brought court actions against people like Darrell Vaz, Shahini Robinson, when they brought these court actions, that the issue was around allegiance and the pledging of allegiance when you're a dual citizen. And the Constitution of Jamaica says that, or allows rather, that somebody who does not have to pledge allegiance can sit in the parliament. So the members who are citizens rather of Commonwealth countries can sit in the parliament after a couple months. It's 6 months when they live here. Sit in the parliament, can vote and sit in the parliament. They swear no other allegiance because they are Commonwealth citizens under the British monarch. So we are one family. The issue with US or other citizens that are required to take an oath of allegiance when they take that citizenship is different. So they're not on the same level. But those arrangements are archaic, they're old. In practice, they don't have any effect today in a modern international landscape where countries have moved away from the direct rule of a monarch.
Yes.
So from the day Jamaica became a self-governing country, even though we still maintained the British monarch as head of state, from the day we got self-governance, self-rule, we should have tried to take that out of the Constitution. Because whoever is now a dual citizen is not guaranteed that they're going to govern on behalf of us, because we govern ourselves. So the issue is, the Constitutional Reform Committee was considering all of those issues. And the question on Jamaica's minds now is, did Mark Golding thwart the work of the Constitutional Reform Committee to change Jamaica's old and archaic laws that allow him to sit as a member, as a Commonwealth citizen in the parliament, whether he has British citizenship or Jamaican citizenship, whether he was born here or not, it doesn't matter. Did he thwart the constitutional reform process to allow him a more comfortable run into the office of Prime Minister, despite his citizenship status? And that is the real question.
All right, Mr. Wallace, I give you 45 seconds to respond. I know it's a short time, but we just have 45 seconds for you to get your comments in.
Because I'd initially respond to that question. To the question, I don't believe Mark Jefferson Golding and his family has done a lot for Jamaica and the ability community through the John Golding Center. So I don't want us to say he has not shown that he has done enough for our people and for our country. I'm not going to go into the debate about whether or not who had a real allegiance to the people of the country, because we can question the 10 that's listed under the illicit enrichment.
Mark Golding and Sir John Golding are two different people, two different individuals.
He could have shut down that operation, could have, forget about it. He maintained it in honor of his father and of his legacy. So, we're not going to go down that road. We talk about the illicit 10. Are they really for Jamaica? Have they really choose Jamaica, or did they choose themselves? And I know they probably know themselves, but they have decided to stay silent. They have decided to seek re-election, and we will see where the chips fall as it relates to that in the future.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. And thank you very much, Mr. Harris, as well. Now, the debate was filled with many tough questions, but it all boils down to Election Day on September 3, when we'll see who takes it home. For now, we rejoin Alia Bryant on the social media desk.
Yes, Ajay, now these comments were filled with mixed emotions. People had a lot to say, so let's start with some comments over on Instagram. One said, I don't hear nobody question JLP's 15% income tax when it will cost more than the $3.5 million threshold. Golding's line about not even bold can't catch Andrew Ponzi scheme money, and Andrew saying why he chose Jamaica sounds like Chronic Law versus Malidon. That's a really good one. Then Mark has international housing. Andrew and his wife have Finsack House. Meanwhile, the rest of us will never own a house. Not sure who won, but Jamaica will lose. So one loves middle class and one loves the poor. And we're going down to our final comments. As a working professional, I saved for years. After SSL, I don't feel safe investing in Jamaica. I need to hear concrete solutions, not political dodge. SSL wasn't just a financial scandal. It was betrayal of trust. The debate should have addressed how leaders will rebuild that trust. And then it says, it's shocking that people are surprised that Mark was so eloquent. Shows most of you don't watch Parliament often. To our last comment, the debate was more reputational and personal than focusing on more of the issues of the people. Now, O'Shane, it's very evident that our viewers were tuned into all three debates and they had a lot to say. So I'll just go back to you for the final comments.
Thanks, Alia. Now, your voices are powerful. Keep the comments coming at #VoteTwenty25. We want to thank Alia, our social media reporter, and thanks to our guests and to you for watching JNN's On the Frontline pre-election special. And a special thanks to Antoinette Aiken for doing our sign language interpretation. I'm O'Shane Masters. See you next time.